Jumlah mangsa banjir di Sabah, Sarawak dan Selangor menunjukkan peningkatan kepada 4,486 mangsa setakat 7 pagi Khamis. Polis sahkan terima laporan sekumpulan lelaki yang cedera selepas dilanggar 2 buah kenderaan yang dipandu secara melulu di hadapan sebuah kelab di Brickfields, Ibu Negara pada Rabu. Pemimpin Pentadbiran Baharu Syria Ahmad Al-Shara diisytiharkan sebagai Presiden Republik Arab Syria dalam fasa peralihan susulan kejatuhan rejim Bashar al-Assad yang memerintah negara itu selama 45 tahun. Ikuti liputan berita dan analisis menyeluruh setiap hari di saluran 501 dan astroawani.com.
Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim Sani. This is The Economy with me. We're taping this slightly before the Chinese New Year. It is the Year of the Snake. There's a lot of people that are on leave. Many of us are also reveling at the joyous moments of the family that we have at home. I myself am having my reunion dinner this evening with my extended family. Some of them are Chinese, so we are definitely going to enjoy ourselves for this year. But in the studio with me is a dear old friend of mine, Daniel Rahman. He's the CEO of the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute. How are you, Dan?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Ibrahim.
So let's talk about a few things here. You were part of the team that looks at some of the governmental initiatives. You are also doing the day job that you do at ASLI. But more importantly, you are an ardent supporter and a keen, observer of ASEAN. Yep. There's a few moments to highlight when it comes to ASEAN rejuvenation and emergence, I suppose. One of them is, of course, the chairmanship of Malaysia in ASEAN. I've seen how the Prime Minister and his ministers are making overtures at the general or the global standing. There's also that nice, quaint little moment where you talked about Jeffrey Sachs in your writings at the Star very recently.
Okay, just this morning.
Yes, really.
You're up to date.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's because you share it in the WhatsApp group. He shares in the WhatsApp group.
That's right.
But also a few days ago, outgoing ambassador or high commissioner, is that ambassador? Ambassador of Brazil to Malaysia. I've known him a few times. I met him a few times. I couldn't join your event, but he too was talking about the rise of BRICS on top of ASEAN.
That's right.
So this
alongside,
so this geopolitical situation is going to be a keen moment for us to look at for this year. Maybe you can give us your view or your take into how these things are going to take place.
Yeah, so firstly, thanks a lot, Brian, for having me on the show. I've also got extended family members who are Chinese.
Yes.
No invites to reunion dinners, but that's okay. I'll be a full week of celebrations, and it's one of the beautiful things about Malaysia. Coming to your question, I think 2025 is an exciting year. I know that's such a cliched statement, but I think it's quite true. So first, you see ASEAN and Malaysia's chairmanship. Why that's very exciting is because it's the first time in 10 years Malaysia is now ASEAN chair again. You know, 10 years ago, our current Prime Minister was still being incarcerated for various reasons. And 10 years on, now he's the leader of the country, but we still see ASEAN, for instance, grappling with issues, for example, certain freedoms, certain geopolitical tensions. So while 10 years ago may seem like a long time, the issues facing ASEAN and all ASEAN countries are not dissimilar. That's the first. Second is, of course, BRICS. This was a relatively new-ish development because Malaysia's interest to join BRICS was expressed last year, early in the year to be precise, and then early in the year there were like discussions with the Brazilian counterparts, and then in June the Prime Minister made the announcement that Malaysia was interested, and that sparked a flurry of, oh, what does this mean? Is Malaysia no longer neutral? You know, are we pivoting to the east? Are we no longer friendly with the West? And there's all of these things happening also against the backdrop of what's currently happening in Gaza. Then the third thing that's currently happening, as we all know, Donald Trump has been resworn as the 47th American president. So at that, and what that therefore means, you know, Trump has come up very strongly, threatening BRICS to impose tariffs if BRICS ever introduced a currency, which I don't think is going to happen. So, you know, we see...
I'm sorry, I disagree. I think...
You think it's going to happen?
No, more of never say never with Trump. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
can happen. Yeah.
But interestingly enough, Ambassador Ari Quintela, the outgoing ambassador of Brazil to Malaysia, actually said, well, Trump has said that against BRICS. He's also threatened his traditional allies. Canada wants to take over Greenland, had a profanity-laden fight with Denmark.
PM,
So in other words, from ASEAN to BRICS to the Americas, you see so many rumblings in 2025, and there's going to be a lot of dust being kicked up.
So you see, all right. So ASLI is of course a policy thinking organization, and you do pool various resources and try to put them together into a legible kind of understanding for us to perhaps adopt or even contest and debate and challenge these kind of policy direction.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the time is now, because the BRICS countries are tend to I don't know whether we should ally ourselves closer to Russia, but the rest of the BRICS members are coalescing and convalescing and moving in one kind of direction. ASEAN is getting stronger in terms of cohesion. Do you feel that that's going to be just the pathway moving forward? We're just going to, dump our interests in the Western world, so to speak.
No, but what do you mean by that, Brahim? Because I don't think joining BRICS necessarily pushes us in any particular direction. It is very commonly assumed that, in BRICS, somehow there's an alignment towards China or even Russia, but we forget there's Brazil. There's also South Africa, and there's also India, countries whom you would not say are anti-West, right?
Okay,
in fact, you could even say there's a strong leaning in that direction. Indonesia, of course, was also recently brought in as a BRICS member. And if you look throughout history, you see that there have been many instances of blocs emerging, demerging, some trendier than others, put simply. You may or may not have heard of the E7, which is a group of emerging countries quite similar to BRICS, but with Turkey and Mexico back in the day. You had one called, I think, the D8, which was of developing countries. That was chaired by Bangladesh until recently. We all know what happened last year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of also fizzled out. So I think historically we've seen, kind of like the rise and fall of different regional blocs. Therefore, to say one regional bloc means the end of, the kind of world order as we know it and a big pivot may not necessarily be true. Rather, what we see BRICS, or at the very least their express statement of intent, has really been to, number one, increase the voice of developing countries. Number two, for them to have a greater say, especially in international organizations. And number three, it's an economic platform, between countries for greater trade. Now, I can't remember the precise numbers, but the BRICS countries control something like 2/3 of basic commodities throughout the world, and there was a PwC report recently that suggested that of the 5 BRICS countries, by 2050, we've got a couple of years to go to 2050. China's going to be the number 1 world economy. The second one's going to be India. The third, fourth, and fifth will be Indonesia, Brazil, and Russia, respectively. So we're looking at the 5 BRIC countries potentially being the 5 most powerful economies in time to come.
In time to come.
So yes,
and not that far.
Not that far off,
That's
like
25 years
it's
away.
about 2.5 decades,
And
so
we all remember where we were in the year 2000. So it's not that far. It really isn't.
Yeah, Y2K, everybody would
Yes,
into their computer.
yes. And this 25 years is just not.
So on one hand, no, I don't think being in BRICS automatically means there's a pivot. But on the other hand, we cannot deny that Western countries, European countries included, will not be a bit concerned about BRICS. Because mind you, while you have BRICS on one hand, many of these countries have also introduced what they call Indo-Pacific strategies. Canada has one, Europe has one, Australia has one. And these are all strategies introduced in the last, I think, 3 to 5 years, some shorter, because there was a recognition that the ASEAN century was going to become what it is now. Some of them, I think, might be a little bit late to the game, but the point is, we'll see. Yeah.
Let's talk about the incoming of our chairmanship of ASEAN specifically. I take note that you were mentioning that regional blocks come and go, some downsized. Say, for instance, the G8 became the G7 and the like. But ASEAN is around, and because of the non-intervention policy, there seems to be some cordial relationship between our ASEAN members, even though some nations, like Myanmar, for instance, might not necessarily have the best track record in terms of human rights defense. Done. Then we look at our Prime Minister. Bapak Prabowo is literally in KL as we speak right now. Last night, the KLCC was lit in a very nice Indonesia flag, one side, Malaysia, one flag.
Yep.
2 weeks ago, it was Singapore, one flag. Malaysia, one flag. 2 weeks ago, it was Thailand.
Yep.
And the list
all about
goes
the
on.
details, yeah?
It is about the details. And they all meet at the Rumah Tangsi for some reason. I don't know who is the person behind the Rumah Tangsi meetup. I really want to find out. But jokes aside, this is truly a commendable effort by MOFA, our Foreign Affairs Ministry, as well as the PMO. And it's not just about the optics. Sizable conversations are being done, and not just conversations, it has translated to big deals, like the Johor-Singapore Southern Economic Zone. We're going to have a Jambatan Darat between Semenanjung and Thailand, or a land bridge. We're going to have an economic zone of sorts, or at least an economic trade zone in northern Thailand. Northern Malaysia, northern Semenanjung Malaysia, so to speak. Indonesia is that big, one big
huge
relationship
market.
that it's more than an economic zone. It's going to be tying up our economy even closer. Do you see a single market coming up soon for ASEAN?
You know, personally, being kind of very much pro-trade, I think that's the dream. Many years ago, I looked into the emergence of competition law, new practices, because the single market was kind of the ideal. Now, whether we will get there necessarily in this chairmanship, I don't know, but I'm pretty confident that this chairmanship will continue to push the expansion of the FTAs within ASEAN countries. We've also seen, as of late October last year, the expansion of the FTA with China, and the resumption of, for example, the EU-ASEAN FTA. So intra-ASEAN, inter-ASEAN, free trade is definitely going to be high on the agenda. Now, notwithstanding BRICS and all the other blocs, ASEAN has made a commitment, including Malaysia and Indonesia and Thailand, who are keen to join BRICS, to the WTO rules-based order. So, those global mechanisms will still be in place. I think it's therefore very exciting to see the roles or the kind of collaborations that are being explored under the Malaysian chairmanship of ASEAN, the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. At the city-to-city level, I think that's something we don't talk about enough, because we see states like Sarawak and renewable energy, Penang and semiconductor, Johor with renewable energy, oil and gas. All of these states actually also have city-to-city links with other cities in ASEAN, for example, with Jakarta, engagement on issues like haze and issues of natural disasters, for example. Whereas on the East Coast side, we've got, East Coast, in the Sarawak side, Borneo side of Malaysia, you've also got engagements between Sarawak and the new upcoming capital of Kalimantan on infrastructural development as well as energy. Then at a wider ASEAN level, EKN, that's right. At the higher ASEAN level, you also have the ASEAN Power Grid, which the Prime Minister has re-emphasized yesterday as being key under this chairmanship, because in the years to come, it should generate enough electricity or electricity sufficiency for ASEAN as a whole. So we see at national level, even state level, so many city-to-city links, economic links, and I do think the ASEAN single market is going to be possible. Technology is a great enabler of that as well. I mean, already with the likes of the Shoppees, there was a few from Indonesia. I can't remember the names right now. But the whole bunch. So it might not be as open as what you might find in Europe, the EU single market. But ASEAN is definitely coming closer to that.
Let's talk about productivity and competition. I am a free market observer. I also would appreciate competition, stiffer competition in the market. If you think about it, Grab is substandard in Malaysia in terms of service quality. For the very fact that there's no competition here. It used to be a few, now there's none. In Indonesia, and I go there quite often these days, it's just marvelous, the service quality of not just Grab, but all the other e-hailing rides there.
Are there a lot there? I've not been there in a while.
Oh yeah, no, there's a few. Gojek, there's a few others. And it's cheap. From Jakarta Timur to Jakarta Selatan, it was just 25,000 rupiah.
How long is that distance?
It's 40 minutes.
That's sweet.
It's cheap. It's like 25,000 rupiah. It's like, I don't know, 8 ringgit, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's awesome. And then I took the Bandung train, the what do you call that? Kereta Cepat, the high-speed train.
High-speed rail, the new one.
I saw the roads, it was really messed up, so I just took a, what do you call this, motorcycle ride.
Okay.
I took my hiking bag, put it in front, off I go.
Oh, brand new.
4 ringgit.
Okay, wow.
It's and the competition is stiff, right?
Yeah.
And Bangkok is the same thing. Last year there was an ACCA conference in Hanoi, and 2 of us took a car, 2 of us took a bike, different bikes, of course. Competition is stiff.
Yeah.
That's just an example of how competition is going to drive productivity.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the ASEAN market can provide that great competition between another, inter-country, intra-country, and see us drive that competition and productivity alive?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the tack-on question to that is, where do you see growth areas in terms of commerce or startups or companies or even governmental mandated industries? Do you feel that those are the like semicon or oil and gas, or is there something else that is hidden here?
Oh, it's a great question. So there's some data points. Recently, in I think 24, the ASEAN, the Master Plan for ASEAN Connectivity (MPAC) had undergone a review. It was originally launched in 2016, reviewed 2021, and now there are ongoing discussions about the next plan. The plan looks at 4 or 5 areas: education, interconnectivity, supply chain, data governance, and one more, which I can't recall at the moment. One of the data points was, in the next 7 years, sorry, no, we're 2025 now. In the next 5 years, by 2030, there'll be about.
You see how fast time.
Yeah, time just moves, right? So and I'm now just trying to recall the numbers. Something like 90 million people will be moving from lower income to middle, and there'll be then a rush for jobs across ASEAN. So that then has raised the conversation of labor force mobility. So when you talk about competition, and you know how it's about Indonesia, there's a lot of service providers, etc. One of that is also because there's just a lot of people, right? One of the things that Europe has done well, and this could be a model, is the freedom of movement and jobs mobility. So that's the first premise. We have to accept that. Now, if you tag that on, the UN SDGs have spoken about how urbanization will go from, I think, 70% of people currently already live in urban areas. That's going to blow up by 2050. In other words, 90% of all economic activity, all people will be in urban areas. So there will be a stressing of existing capital cities, existing urban centers across ASEAN, be it Jakarta, Bandung, Kuala Lumpur, Johor, Bangkok, wherever it might be. So what that also suggests is therefore going to be a need to spread out the economic opportunities and the economic businesses. And then you contrast that with China, right? Tier 1 cities, Tier 2, Tier 3. Of course, they are just huge by size, but that's something that ASEAN. So if you look at ASEAN as a whole, that's something that can be done. Now, just to kind of add on a little bit before I answer that second part of your question, of about 600-700 million population in ASEAN, about 50%, I was quite surprised to read this statistic, about 50% are unbanked yet. That means no access to financial services or do not have the traditional bank account that we understand it. So what does that mean? That means there's a whole group of people who need digital services, but more importantly, who themselves could be entrepreneurial in nature, but don't have access to the facilities to make that happen, right? So coming back to your question, semiconductor, what the industry is, look, I think let's just split it into 2. On one hand, you've got all this high-tech stuff, semicon, renewable energy, data centers, artificial intelligence, cloud, the works, right? And that's definitely going to be the driver of high-income, high-technology businesses.
Yeah, but it kind of need a lot of capital, billions. They need state involvement.
Okay, let's not get to capital in a moment. But the second part are the entrepreneurial side of things. We forget there's still, 98% of Indonesia's economy is SMEs, 93% in Malaysia's SMEs. So what does that mean? That means these are the people or the groups that need to be empowered. Those who are stepping in. So how do we make them entrepreneurial from, textiles, food, services, and making sure that they have sufficiency within those realms? Because let's be very clear, the high-tech industries are not always human intensive. There's a lot of wealth generated, there's a lot of productivity output, but there's not enough necessarily people who benefit from the wealth, right? So the industries that you're talking about, I think tourism is going to play a really important role. Agriculture will definitely play an important role with food security and all that. And I think one more is education. we often underestimate the value of education in the larger society, and this education will therefore lead to services within, aging society care, right? Or, in the future, once automation and robots have taken over, it's really the care economy, which I think needs to grow. And all of this, all industries, mobility, etc., fundamentally, distribution of wealth is important. Yeah.
So speaking about distribution of wealth, let's talk a little bit more about the domestic situation here in Malaysia.
Okay.
You on air with Niaga Wani on the morning of the Forum Economy Malaysia, and there's a few things that you touched upon, but one thing that really piqued my interest was something along the lines of attracting investors to something to that effect. Do you feel that investors are looking at our economy with lesser risk premium being associated with it, more stable government in place? How do you think the FEM fared all in all? And of course, not just that, the KL20 that we had last year, and again another KL20 this year and so on. Do you feel that these are the kind of things that we want to see, at least from the perspective of investors coming in?
Yeah. So if we see the first 9 months of last year, FDI into Malaysia is about 250 billion, which is a record, and year-on-year increase. We haven't heard yet what the numbers as of December are yet, but there's likely going to be huge upsides that we'll see. The big tech companies, Google, Amazon, AWS, Microsoft, have invested approximately, Nvidia, approximately $16 billion US, or at least the commitments of which. There's no doubt my observations, our observations of us, of Malaysia, is that we are kind of like the envy of ASEAN at the moment. All these tech companies are coming in. So the first bit is...
I don't know. I think Philippines won the title of most tourists attracted in 2024. So countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand lost out to Philippines. So I guess that... For me, I envy Philippines.
We're envious in different ways, right?
Yeah. For tourism, somehow or other,
but then just looking at investments, and I suppose the value, Malaysia has definitely caught the attention of the global community of investors. Now, FEM, the Forum Economy Malaysia, I think was very timely. Nice to have been done early in the year, recap a little bit of what happened last year and the year before, because you have to understand that everything that we quote-unquote achieved last year has been a continuous process, post-COVID reopening period, right? And therefore, it's a very good time. And for those of us in Malaysia, maybe not myself and you, because we are observers of the space, for a lot of the foreign investors, those who are not as exposed to economic developments as we are, for them it's a great eye-opener and curtain raiser, because we've been talking to some of the European investors, private equity, and they don't know much about Malaysia in terms of just how we are and what we are doing and how we're doing. In fact, there's not as much PE funds or investment funds coming from Europe yet into Malaysia. Europe means the family offices, the private equity guys, right? So FEM was therefore very timely to kind of set the stage for it. I think what needs to be done more is to continue to speak up about these investment opportunities. So in that sense, I think Malaysia is in good stead. However, Trump 2.0, what we currently see with some potential tariffs, we've seen yesterday the fall of Nvidia because of just the emergence of the new AI, DeepSeek, was it?
It's a China brand with a whale.
With a whale.
DeepSeek.
Coincidentally, interface totally the same as ChatGPT.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't tried it out. I wish after this I'll try it out.
After this. I'm tempted though. I just haven't.
I know because I went to the App Store. It's there, and I'm like, should I not?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But then, so we see is while Malaysia is riding on a high, we must still remain optimistically cautious, because you never know when the technological tide will change. So, yes, good to invest and focus on investments in high-tech space, but let's be careful and not overly hedge on that.
So, final question then is on the question of what... Final? It's burned 30 minutes already. Is on the topic of what are you going to do for this year? What are you looking at? What are your interest areas? I mean, I can have 10 interest areas, but I only want to work on 2 or 3 of those, for instance. So what's your universe looking like? And what are the 2 or 3 things that you're going to focus on?
So for me, for us at the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute, number 1 is leadership development. I've attended a number of events and conferences. I was in Hong Kong not too long ago. And there's a lot of conversation about the hard stuff, the investments, the money, the infrastructure, the legal services. the supply chain, all fine and good. Nothing's wrong with that because that's what drives the economy. But what is often missed out is who are the kind of talents that we are building, not just in Malaysia, but across ASEAN, in order to meet the demands of higher infrastructure, better supply chain, etc., etc. And I firmly believe that that's going to be the game changer. It is actually one of the reasons why Malaysia has been doing quite well and is quite attractive, because we have strong command of English generally across the board, an education system that's decently solid. We've had our shakes in the couple of past years. And I'm just going to contrast this with the discussion about this AI from China. One of the commentators I was watching had asked, he said, this came out of nowhere. 3 months, $6 million reported. But in order for this to happen, the number of talent, programmers, software engineers, coders that they would have needed in the back office would have been huge. And to have assimilated all that talent under the radar of, I suppose, just the wider global community, the business community, would have been no short feat. So for ASLI, looking at leadership development, skills development, for young people, for leaders, is something that I think is absolutely crucial and definitely a worthwhile investment in.
All right. I think that's another area of concern for Yayasan Penaraju as well. That's why we're focusing on leadership development, but we're doing it through the certification and training of the 2 programs that we're doing, mostly on Penaraju Professional as well as Penaraju Technology, because we too feel that the software, the content, so to speak, of people executing the programs has to be upskilled and enhanced. And that leadership element is what we're looking for moving forward, because anybody can get reskilled and upskilled. At cheap prices, by the way, Khan Academy or whatever the MOOCs that you have. You're very familiar with MOOCs, actually. And even LinkedIn Learning for intent purposes. So it's not just about the skilling and retraining, it is the leadership element. And how many times have we heard, oh, we don't have enough leaders, our leaders are truly poor of quality and the likes. So it's not necessarily easy to build leaders, and that's the problem, I suppose. So how are you going to move forward in terms of addressing this whole notion of it's hard to be leaders, make leaders?
Well, I think for ASLI, we are part of the Jeffrey Chia Foundation, which is part of the wider Sunway Group ecosystem. So one of the things that I've been given the mandate to do, and I'm very excited for this, is to open up the ecosystem, 50 years or 5 decades of, I like to say, very strong public sector, private sector, corporation development, and to invite leaders from around the region to come to ASLI, come and see me, and we'll be happy to see how we can expose you with best practices, best benchmarks to nurture these leaders. At least at my level, this is one thing that we can do on a very tangible perspective. Now, from a policy perspective, this is where we need to continue to write, to do research, because I'll tell you one thing, Ibrahim. What the current administration, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and the Madani government is doing by pushing TVET, for example, and high-tech TVET in Malaysia, is something that should and can be duplicated at the ASEAN level. So the blueprint that we have for technology, vocational education, can be imported and should be a main agenda within ASEAN, because then we look at how do we bridge the skills gap at the ASEAN level. Make ASEAN, not just a tourist destination, but destination for the production of high-tech goods, but also, high-value services. So I think at those levels, that's what we can see ourselves doing.
Fantastic conversation. I'm going to have you on the show a lot more. Really, it's
Thanks,
truly fascinating. That was Dan Rahman, the CEO of the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute. As you heard him, find him, especially if you yearn to be part of the story of how to build leaders, at least in this part of the world. So that's Dan Rahman of ASLI. If you missed out any part of this show, just head on to Astro Awani and find out TEWIS, or TEWIS, The Economy with Ibrahim Sani, and find out more there. Till then, Kong Si Fa Chai, Sining Kuala, Kong Hep Choi, Happy Chinese New Year, take care and be safe wherever you are. My name is Ibrahim Sani, catch you in the next one.
Sudah 3 bulan Iman Shah dilaporkan hilang dan masih diburu polis. Sehingga kini, lokasi suspek masih belum dikenal pasti.
Tapi bila undang-undang mampu dijual beli, apa pilihan yang kita ada?
Bakar tempat ni. Aku nak duit aku balik.
Satu cara Noh Ibu Zara hapuskan menteri korup. Rakyat dah dengar, Chan. Mula masa dia.
Tak sangka malaikat dengan iblis boleh bekerjasama.
Iblis dulu pun asalnya malaikat.
One Cent Thief Season 2 stream 31 Januari on demand Astro Citra dan Astro Go.
Hello, you're watching Niaga Awani with me, Nina Rosman, and today is a very special episode, and we will be discussing about economy outlook. What are the challenges and opportunities, and how can we benefit from all of this? And definitely, it's a busy year for Malaysia, as Malaysia this year is the leader for ASEAN 2025. And how can we see from all of this, Malaysia can benefit all of this in the economic and even the social aspect. And for that, I want to welcome you, our guest, the Group Chief Economist, Maybank Investment Bank, Suhaimi Ilyas. I want to say thank you very much for joining me. Firstly, we want to take a look on Malaysia outlook. Definitely, this is the first month of 2025. We still have a long way to go. But having an outlook, looking forward, can you share with us where is Malaysia right now and where are we heading in terms of economy?
Thank you, Nina. I think we are in good spot, so to speak, in terms of economic growth. We have seen our economic growth doing well last year, growing, we believe, slightly above 5%. We think the momentum will remain relatively intact. We are looking at growth of 4.9%. We do have to inject some caution about the external environment, especially with Trump 2.0, where there's a lot of concern about US trade policies and tariff actions, not just to China, but potentially the rest of the world. So I think with that, we do inject some caution in terms of our outlook for export growth. But having said that, I think the main growth narrative or story for Malaysia is really the resilience of our domestic demand. First and foremost, I think for this year, even into next year, budget 2025 actually provide a boost for consumer spending. Obviously with measures like the revisions to civil service salaries and pension, increase in minimum wage, as well as an increase in allocations for cash handouts for the lower income group. So I think that would inject a sizable amount of money or funds into the wallets of these people, and that will translate into consumer spending. So we do look at stronger consumer spending this year, up to 5.8% from 5.2% last year. But I would say the other key story for Malaysia, which actually I'm more excited about, is investment upcycle. I think with political stability, the government of the day is able to focus on long-term policy making. And after announcing all those master plan, roadmaps, blueprints, strategic initiatives, we are now in the phase where we are seeing a lot of these policies are being executed and implemented. Investors like it, and because of that, they are translating that into actionable, what you call investment in the economy. So I think domestic demand would be particularly resilient to support a sustained momentum in Malaysia's economic growth despite the external headwinds. So I would call it an environment of domestic tailwind mitigating external headwinds.
And this is some of the key drivers that will accelerate the Malaysia's growth by 2025. And considering all the domestic initiative and even the external factors, how can Malaysia, looking at our position right now, can manage global and even domestic risks that can potentially impact our country?
So I think as mentioned earlier, maybe there's two sets of risks that people are keeping an eye on. One is domestic risk more in terms of inflation, because of course there are the flip side of increase in labour costs, adjustment in fuel subsidies, as well as all this talk about potential adjustment as well in the electricity tariff rates in the second half of this year. But again, as I said, budget 2025 take note of the concerns, and they are compensating that in terms of increases in income of people. But I think at the same time, to mitigate the external risks, in particular the global concerns, investment momentum have to be sustained. So I think this way is very, as I said, very interesting, very exciting that we are seeing, for example, data center boom that has been happening in Malaysia. I think that reflects the fact that we do have the right policy in place, complemented by cost competitiveness, comparative advantage that attract investment in those areas. And obviously, this week, the biggest development, good positive news for the year is Johor's Singapore Special Economic Zone, which I think is also going to be another catalyst to sustain the investment upcycle that we are seeing. I think, bear in mind, when it comes to investment upcycle, taking it over the long term, there are two dynamics that are also key. One is digitalization, and that helps in terms of us attracting the investment, FDIs in data centers. The other one is decarbonization, going green. And I think this is a long period of investment that we're going to see, because obviously the government have very ambitious target in terms of the share of renewable energy in our total electricity generation. So a lot of things going on in terms of investment, in my opinion.
And looking at our initiative and policies in pushing and pulling in more investment, do we need more improvement on the policy so we can attract more foreign direct investment?
I think the government already putting in place various policy measures. First, of course, the blueprint that provide clarity in terms of where we are heading, what we want to achieve over the medium to longer term. And this is being progressively and actively complemented by tax incentives as well as other form of fiscal incentive. So again, I think a very good example of execution and implementation is, the day after a government signed the JSSEZ agreement, MOF, Ministry of Finance, immediately come up with a tax incentive to attract investment in the flagship areas in Johor's Singapore Special Economic Zone, to attract talent in terms of knowledge workers, as well as obviously signaling that they are willing to actually listen to investors in terms of what they need, so that we can come up with a customized, tailor-made incentive.
Okay, right. And for more, we want to check on how can Malaysia better leverage in digital economy to counteract not only global but also domestic challenges.
I think going digital is obviously one of the key big thing that's happening in Malaysia right now. I think obviously the main catalyst or driver for that would be the government sector, the public sector. I think of late we are seeing a lot of initiative on the part of various ministries, various agencies in the government to come up with applications. And I think this is a way for us to increase the adaptation of digital process into our daily life. I would say the whole process of digitalization has actually been accelerated by the pandemic. Because of the need for us to do things, I suppose, online and remotely. So I think the whole process of digitalization has been accelerated because of pandemic, and we are just continue to ride on that wave or curve of acceleration in digitalization. And the government is also, again, providing incentives for the corporate sector to also go on board this digitalization process, particularly for the SMEs, where they're trying to basically encourage the transition, transition in some aspect of their operations to be digital, because this is a way for them to also mitigate some of the concerns about increasing costs. Yeah.
And I also want to take a look on sustainable growth, as we know that Government Madani has focused on increasing our ceiling, the floor. This is to boost our economy and rakyat. Maybe you can share with us what mechanism should be in place to ensure inclusive growth across different group, different region, because we know even every individual, every household, and even every district, states have their own needs.
I think when it comes to this aspect, the government is obviously focusing on various forms of targeted policies. So I guess you can see in terms of subsidies, for example, the government is not taking away subsidies in totality. We are not going into a subsidy-free economy anyway. We are just taking or adopting an approach where subsidy goes to those deserving and needing. That would basically free up fiscal space for the government to allocate the money saved from subsidy spending into other areas that you mentioned earlier, in terms of a more balanced regional or state development, in terms of being able to have the financial resources to support certain long-term policy initiative, particularly in terms of reskilling, upskilling, in terms of promoting TVET education, in terms of talent development, and for that matter, the whole broad policy approach with regards to human capital development. Because as we want to improve our economy to do more high value added, high growth activities, I think one of the key issues that has been raised is about adequacy of talent supply. So this is again where I think the government approach is again to be very focused in terms of policy and spending, to be very targeted, create the fiscal space where they can then allocate the limited financial resources of the government into the right areas.
And we know that Malaysia aims not to only increase, we want to lower down the spending, but increase the revenue. So as per se, talking about since last year about tax and certain tax that was introduced, do you think this is the best time to implement tax for this year?
Again, like I said, even when it comes to tax, it is also targeted. So basically, those with the broadest shoulders carry the most burden. In the sense that if you look at and from my analysis anyway, the tax measures, the tax system, the tax reform that has been implemented over the past couple of years is, I guess, geared towards taxing more income. I think those with higher income pay more. We have seen the adjustment in individual income tax rate. We have seen move to tax dividend, to tax capital gains, to tax foreign source income. I think this is a fair approach, because obviously Malaysia is still in this situation where we are going through the middle income dilemma and still in the process of moving into higher income group. But I think once the system is in place, the investment continues to be sustained, economic growth will be stronger, and ultimately tax is a function of economic growth anyway. And I think the government can then enjoy better tax income through sustained strong economic growth, through robust business activities, and as more and more people move into higher income tax bracket, I mean they will again contribute their fair share to the government coffers. So I don't really think the government is just going to penalize the higher income group, the wealthy people per se, but it's more of in the interim we need to do this, but the longer term strategy is really sustain economic growth, move more businesses and people into the higher income category so that they can contribute to the coffers naturally.
And this is certain tax and an incentive for certain or selected group, industry, but how about GST? What's your thought on that?
To be honest, I think the messaging from maybe Yang Mahathir Prime Minister is pretty clear. I guess it's not something that the government is considering at this point of time. As I said, that explains why the tax policy seems to be more biased or tilted towards taxing higher income group, and the income generated by activities in the capital market, in terms of investment abroad, in terms of dividend earns and all that.
Lima lelaki penghantar makanan didakwa di Mahkamah Magistrate Bangi atas tuduhan membunuh seorang pemandu kereta lelaki dalam satu kejadian.
4 sungai di sekitar kawasan perindustrian Pasir Gudang di Johor termasuk Sungai Kim Kim didapati tercemar dan berada pada tahap yang membimbangkan. Kerajaan sudah mulakan inisiatif untuk menggantikan kenderaan operasinya kepada kenderaan elektrik EV dalam skala kecil terlebih dahulu.
Aku netu tepat aku sendiri.
Kahwa iCouncil Early Access di rumah, sewa dan stream on demand atau sila ke saluran 480.
probably we want to take a look at the structure or probably a model, framework for future tax. If we are implement GST probably next year, what is some of the best model framework? Should we start with a low rate first and then slowly increase, or should we start with a strong rate? What some of the best approach we can look at?
Well, I suppose these are hypothetical questions. I think obviously the feeling out there is actually there's a lot of support for the reintroduction of GST, and I guess we can also see quite clearly that the idea is the tax rate should not be too high. So I guess instead of the 6% that we had previously, maybe it can start at a lower level, which I think is reasonable, because even if it's, let's say, it's 3 or 4%, the base of the economy is larger now than when GST was introduced. It is still possible that the amount of revenue that government can generate of a 4% or 3% GST rate now would still be more than what they collect at 6% GST back then, because, as I said, the economy is larger now. And the other thing, I suppose, is it's very important for us to not repeat the mistake that we had when we implemented GST last time, which was the rather long time it took for businesses to get back their input tax rebates. So I guess this is something that needs to be guaranteed in terms of how soon or how fast can businesses get back their input tax claim, because it affects the cash flow, and then if things are not as efficient as businesses would have liked, I think that would have an implication in terms of making GST inflationary in the end, because if the businesses cannot get their rebates, they would pass the cost to consumers.
Definitely, whatever models or framework we want to implement within the tax incentive, it also depends on our economy position as well. Is it the right time or not? Is it the best approach? Definitely, that is the thing that we have to take into consideration, like you mentioned. And I want to take a look on further for cooperation within, we can say, cross-sector, cross-agency, for example. We want to take a look on economy, social. This is something that we have to do to strengthen the value, the life of our people and our economy. But at the same time, what can we do to ensure a better mechanism of collaboration between agency, between governments, between the private sector? So how can they work together and maybe lessen all the maybe bureaucracy and all of that? Maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
I think this is where it's a function of the leadership. If the leadership put a lot of emphasis on the need for us to break the silos, start working together more efficiently, I think that would be key. And I think the push has to come from the leadership in the country to get the various government ministries and agencies to work better seamlessly together. But I guess if you look at some of the strategic initiative, roadmap, master plan that are being that was announced earlier, it already shows you that the government ministries and agencies are already working together. I mean, it is not a blueprint, a master plan or roadmaps that are created in isolation by one ministries or one agencies. There's a lot of collaboration happening behind the ground, and I'm optimistic and feel constructive about that, because once the planning process itself involves various ministries and agencies, naturally the implementation would also have to be a case of teamwork.
And this is the year of opportunity for us, especially for Malaysia as a leader of ASEAN 2025. Maybe what are some of the things of approach that we can learn from our neighboring country, the regional, probably in terms of adapting this policy and probably adapting this initiative? Maybe some of the things that we can learn from other countries that we can adapt within the local context.
I think again the key word here is cooperation and collaboration. So if you look at JSSEZ, that is really about cooperation and collaboration, while at the surface of it is about Malaysia working together with Singapore. But when it comes to our side, we can see how there is a need for various parties at federal government, state government and local government having to work together efficiently to make sure that one of key aspects of making JSEZ successful is great, what I call BUX or IUX, business and investors experience. Just as you talk about business, everybody is talking about customer experience. You talk about software applications, technologies, about user experience. I think for us it's very important to make sure that business and investors experience are great. And I think from that they would share the great experience with the counterparts, the peers about great experience that they had in terms of investing in Malaysia within the context of, let's say, JSEZ. I think that can certainly help to help us make JSEZ successful. Similarly, I think one key area to make ASEAN work well as a unit and become attractive as a global investment destination is being able to successfully implement these ideas or this proposal of ASEAN Power Grid, because one of the key factor that can decide whether investors are going to come is whether or not we're going to have basic infrastructure ready. So I think ASEAN Power Grid would be a great example to showcase how Malaysia, being the chair of ASEAN, can initiate something that is material for the development of the region as a whole.
And from all of that we have discussed, what are some of the other fiscal priorities that probably we can't see but is for the best of our country?
Well, I mean, as a taxpayer myself, I would like to get the biggest bang for my tax-paying money.
Okay.
So I guess from the perspective what the government has done so far, we welcome it, we appreciate it. But I suppose one key thing that we need to see is a more efficient, transparent, and better governed government spending.
Okay.
So I think I'm encouraged by the fact that the government is going to come up with Government Procurement Act. So I think that would address the issue of governance in government spending, because I think within the context of limited fiscal space, fiscal resources, it's very important that the government spending deliver the most value. It's not about quantity of government spending, it's the quality of government spending, which include dealing with the issue of past issues of leakages and wastages.
And considering we will be the ASEAN leader for 2025 this year, actually, what's your hope and what can we do better moving forward?
Well, I mean, I'm really hoping to see ASEAN as a whole would be able to really establish themselves as a economic powerhouse, as a bloc. I think the potential is always there. There has been various initiatives in trying to elevate ASEAN, and I think we are getting into that stage where the time is here for us to do something meaningful with regards to ASEAN development. Because as mentioned by Yang Berhormat Perdana Menteri in his speech, by Yang Berhormat Tuan Rafizi Ramli also during his session, he talked about how ASEAN is in this sweet spot where it is going to sustain growth about 4 to 5% per annum. There will be a big uplift in the people in terms of moving into the middle income class, and I think that is one of the major attraction for ASEAN to together with Malaysia, to seize the moment, so to speak, to take advantage of the dynamics that are in our favor, but at the same time create what you call a buffer against the uncertain external environment.
We want to make sure that all industries and even sector grow and achieve all their KPI. That's very important. But for example, like we know that sector is going to boost Malaysia. It's like from the service, semiconductor, and probably one the technology and innovative sector. But how about the small players like the SME, MSMEs? How can we ensure that we don't left them behind?
I think if you look at government policy, we look at annual budgets, SME is always being shown a lot of care and love. They're getting a lot of attention from government policy. I would say, obviously, the need going forward is to elevate their status from being just mainly domestic player to be at least a regional player, if not global player. So this is where, again, when you look at it, ASEAN has a role to play in elevating our SMEs to be a global player, to be more export-oriented. And I find it's also interesting that Malaysia is in the process of trying to gain membership into BRICS. Now, why BRICS? I look at it from purely economic reason, which is, among other things, and ultimately it's really about continuing with our current trade structure, which is very diversified. So I guess BRIC offers an opportunity for us to have new expanded global markets, and I think this is where our SMEs can also take advantage of. Because if you look at NIMP 2030, one of the key target is to raise the share of SME export to total export to around 25%. From where we are now, about 11 to 12%. How are we going to achieve that? I think it's very tough, challenging to achieve that by gaining access to developed market. But I think there's so much more opportunity to gain access to emerging markets, and BRIC is obviously one of the key emerging markets that I think is going to be an important sort of a block going forward.
And talking about emerging markets and advanced economies, also markets, and talking about BRICS is a whole scale. And talking about ASEAN, it's not only ASEAN, but there's ASEAN plus 3, ASEAN plus 6, there's a more of it. But in ASEAN international context, as Malaysia, if we say about ASEAN, ASEAN plus, then we will talk about the economy of emerging and economy of advanced working together. Okay, in terms of Malaysia, in every of our partnerships, international, locally, especially Malaysia, open economy but small economy, like they say, do we have the credibility, capacity? But we can learn from Singapore, smaller than us, but we can see their advanced economies. And what are some of the things that we can learn, emerging economies like Malaysia can learn from advanced economy, so Malaysia can only not lead the conversation, but also take the lead?
I think, again, this is where, when it comes to being engaged, at least in global conversation, and also leading in certain areas, we do, certainly under leadership of Yang Amat Berhormat Prime Minister. He has been actively engaging in the discussion at regional and global levels on various issues. Some of it are, I suppose, pretty close to his heart in terms of social justice, in terms of equality, in terms of emerging markets, developing countries having greater say in the whole global policy debates and discussion. So I think there's no issue with regards to us, having a say on things. But I guess at the same time, there's also some good platform for us to take advantage of. And I think our ASEAN chairmanship this year would be that.
Again, I would say thank you very much. This is a very insightful sharing, and what to expect for Malaysia's economy from internal, external, from the challenges and even opportunities that we need to take a look on. Again, I would say thank you very much to Suhaimi Ilyas, and definitely for all of you, if you want to catch this exclusive discussion with our guest here, Suhaimi Ilyas, the Group Chief Economist, Maybank Investment, definitely we will feature in astralawani.com and across all social media platforms.
University Malaya UM is expected to offer a cardiothoracic specialist training course this October.
There will be no U-turn on the implementation of the Vehicle Entry Permit VEP for all foreign vehicles entering Malaysia from Singapore.
Diesel sales at petrol stations have decreased by 30% within the first week of the fuel subsidy rationalisation on June 10th.
Tahta legenda Piala Malaysia kini terbentang di hadapan.
Oh, cantik gerakan ini peluang!
Hanya yang gagah mampu melangkah megah memburu kejuaraan.
Perjuangan! Oh, cantik!
Menggenggam erat semangat membara. Sokonglah sepenuhnya demi Liga kita. Separuh akhir Piala Malaysia secara langsung di Astro.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so pleased to welcome you to the session, World in Numbers, Jobs and Tasks. I'm Neela Richardson. I'm Chief Economist of ADP and Head of ADP Research. And joining me today is Andrew Un. We are both going to provide some thoughts and delve into the latest Future of Jobs report. Now, Andrew doesn't need an introduction. He is founder of Deep Learning AI Inc., and I'm so pleased to be able to do this session with you. So without further ado, let's think and let's talk about the world of work over the next 5 years. So in this era, in this new wave, we're seeing technology drive the future of work. And not just technology, demographic change, meta trends, creating and destroying some jobs. But over time, we're seeing not just job creation, but a change in the skill set. In fact, according to the Future of Jobs report, which surveyed 1,000 global employers and representing 14 million workers in 22 industries in over 50 countries, we're seeing that 2/5 of core skills will change over the next 5 years. That's a tremendous amount of change, but it's not the fastest our skill sets have changed. In fact, the pandemic ushered in even faster change, but this is more sustainable. It's not just about pandemic, it's about technology and these other meta trends that will be ushering in a new way of working in the world. And so when we think about the 5 key drivers of the labor market, it starts with that first one, technological change, and the broad access to the digital environment, which allows generative platforms like AI to take root in the workforce. The second trend, the green transition, with over half of global employers saying that they're making key investments in lowering their carbon emissions. The third trend, geographic fragmentation. This is really important when you think about the supply chain and trade. The fourth trend, this one is the one that captures my attention because what we're seeing is 2 different trends at once. These demographic shifts that are hitting higher income countries and leading to a wave of retirements as the workforce ages is happening at the same time that in lower income countries, there has been a growth spurt in the prime age worker and how the world deals with this new globalization, the globalization of people, services, as well as trade and goods will define growth for the next 5 years. And then this final trend, economic uncertainty, it's never gone. It's always a part of how the world does business. But in a more complex world, that uncertainty grows, especially when you're thinking about the first mega trend, technological change. And this leads to, again, a dichotomy in the growth that we're seeing in terms of where the jobs are coming. Now, the first set of jobs in terms of the largest employment changes happen in those infrastructure jobs, those jobs on the front line of creating local economies. So you're going to see an explosion of growth for farmers and laborers in agriculture, but also in delivery trucks and services, getting those goods to the locations that are needed. Of course, now technology is part of a country's infrastructure, even for lower income countries. So growth in software and application developers. Also growth in construction workers and building that infrastructure, not just residential, but data centers to support that growth in technology. And let's not forget retail. As the middle class grows, so does the consumer base, and so does the growth in shopkeepers. But also the fastest growing jobs, not necessarily the largest in employment, but in the fastest in rate. Big data specialists, all tied to the technology related roles, financial tech engineers, AI and machine learning specialists, software application developers, and let's not forget about data security. Underneath all of this is the importance of data security in amplifying all the data and technology needs of the future. So it's a combination when you think about the 5 mega trends that are driving the labor force over the next 5 years. It's a combination of hard skills and soft skills. It's a combination of people and tech. The global workforce doesn't just want technology. They also need a skilled workforce who can innovate, who can think creatively, and also work collaboratively. And so here are the key skills that global employers are saying that they need. The first 3 are tech-related, AI and big data skills. No surprise there if you're thinking about a technologically advanced future, technological literacy, networks, and cybersecurity. But think of the people skills also require that human connection when it comes to resilience, flexibility, agility, the ability to think creatively, to be a lifelong learner. It's only through a skilled workforce where the promise and power of generative AI really amplifies the human condition and raises the standard of living for all. Next slide. And so in this world where you're seeing the need for skills and the skills opportunity, you must also realize that it's important that the workforce is upskilled and that it's upskilled in a way that meets the needs of the global business community. And those needs are really important when it comes to those who are left behind. The Future of Jobs report says that a segment leading to 120 million people may not receive the skills that they need to advance in the world. And we know that these skills are not widespread. The skills gap, there are in lower income countries. So there is a need to match where the workforce is growing with where the skills needs are. And that gap is critical to close in the future. So if we go to the next slide, ADP was so excited to partner with the World Economic Forum and really understanding the worker perspective so that we can think about how to close these skill gaps. And what we did is we matched worker sentiment with the employer sentiment from the Future of Jobs report. And what we have mapped out here for you is what workers find valuable and what employers find valuable. And let me give you the takeaway up front. They don't always match. So at ADP Research, not a big surprise. ADP Research, we actually surveyed the global workforce, 38,000 people in 34 economies around the world. And what we found is what workers really, really value is career advancement. So you can see there's alignment in that dark blue for employees and the turquoise color for employers when it comes to improving talent progression and promoting the skills process. There's also a lot of alignment not shown here in wages. Now, it's no surprise that workers want higher wages. Anyone surprised by that? No. But employers actually want to see wage growth too, because wage growth is tied to productivity, and they know that they need a productive workforce to operate in the new world. But there are also places of misalignment. And where we see those places is what workers value most coming out of the pandemic. Anyone want to wager a guess quickly? Flexibility. It's flexibility and the ability to maintain their own schedules. That's number 1 for the global workforce, but it's only number 8 for employers. Now, one of the things that I think is really beneficial coming out of the pandemic is that global employers recognize the importance of a healthy workforce to have a thriving business. And you see in their survey responses from the Future of Jobs report that the global employer base still cares about the worker. They still want to prioritize supporting employee health and well-being. The disconnect is that the workforce has kind of moved on from that. They only value that support from their employer at number 8. And so it's also not quite a surprise that if you're seeing, especially in higher income countries, a lot of workers reaching retirement age, that employers are very focused on this last place of disconnect, changes to pension plans that extend the retirement age. Not so important, or actually at the other end of the spectrum for employees. Next slide. So we wanted to focus on, at ADP Research, this gap between what the global employer base told World Economic Forum in terms of the future of work and what we see every day in terms of working with a global workforce. And so we went and surveyed, again, 38,000 workers in 34 countries and asked them, do you feel prepared to move your career over the next 3 years? Remember, career advancement was the one place of alignment that we elicited in this collaboration, but only 24% of the global workforce actually feel like they have the skills they need to advance their careers in the next 3 years. 24%. And if you dissect that to the 2/3 who have an advanced degree beyond high school, who have vocational training or a college degree or an advanced degree, that 24% moves up to 27%. So even for the most skilled of our workforce, they don't feel prepared in the next 3 years. That's a finding that people should circle. It has a big meaning for employers because only 17% feel strongly that their employers invest in the skills they need to advance. Here is the skills opportunity. Workers demand it, and there's a reason why employers should listen. Next slide. Now at ADP, we're not only able to elicit what workers feel and care about, we're actually able to measure it. We're able to measure the skills opportunity with this big data set that we have at ADP for US workers. And we found something remarkable when it comes to skills. We look at jobs through the lens of the Occupational Information Network, the ONET network, which defines different job zones from the lowest need for preparation all the way up to the highest. Think dishwasher, brain surgeon. And in that big range of job preparedness, we found that on average, a worker sees a 37% pay bump from going from one level of skills preparation to the next. 37% on average. So the gains from upskilling are enormous, but there's more to this. For men on average, they experience a 44% bump in wage gains, but for women, only 30%. And when we get to the most complex jobs, that skills advantage, that gap becomes even wider. Again, for the most skilled jobs, men see a 44% bump in higher medium wages, women, 15%. So there's a huge opportunity here to close that skills gap in gender, to close that skills gap when it comes to geography, to give workers what they want and need to be successful over the next 5 years. ADP research has found that workers who are upskilled, who feel like their employers invest in their skill set, do two things very, very well. They tend to be very loyal to their employer, and they tend to be very productive in their self-reporting of their work. And so if you want a happy, engaged workforce, one that thrives, one that innovates, and one that captures the amazing opportunity that we have in store with a technological boom, investment in skills is a requirement and a necessity. And to say more about that investment, I'm pleased to bring up to the stage Andrew, my co-panelist.
Thank you. Thanks, Nina. Can people hear me okay? All right. So I thought that was great data. And I feel like a lot of the drivers of long-term changes in workforce are really driven by technological change. I think human nature has stayed quite similar for a long time, but it's really technological change and maybe geopolitical change that are driving a lot of these. So what I thought I'd do is to complement Nila's presentation with some observations of what Coursera and DeepLearn.ai and I work at different businesses are seeing on the ground with technological change, with a lens particularly on AI. So I know that for a lot of employees, maybe even some of us in this room, people are wondering, will AI take my job? And what I am seeing, what we're seeing in many businesses is because of the power of AI, one of the most important skills for the current generation of workers as well as for the next generation is the ability to get computers to do exactly what you want it to do. Because with computers able to tackle more and more tasks, people in all walks of life and all types of job functions are able to use computers or AI to do what you want it to will be materially more powerful. So maybe some examples, just to bring this to life. On my team, I have a former journalist that just last week showed me code that he had written to scrape news feeds, to read RSS feeds, to highlight for him news articles that he should pay attention to and maybe cover. I have a finance person that puts together an app that monitors exchange rates in real time and sends her notifications so that she can better manage our global set of bank accounts with currency in different, various different currencies. And I think these are examples of people that are not software engineers, but have learned enough about AI and how to program in order to use computers to enhance the job functions. So in this next period of time, and I think I want to reflect on some things that I see as a technologist that may not yet show up in today's data, but I think will be driven by upcoming technology. I think that in the future, AI won't take people's jobs, but people that know AI will take the jobs of people that don't. And the other important trend is employee productivity will rise, I think in a fairly spectacular way if you empower them with AI tools. I know some of you may have children. If you do, my advice is get them to learn to code because for the foreseeable future, people with a deep understanding of technology and AI will be able to use computers much more effectively, whatever job profession they end up doing. Beyond this technology trend, what we're also seeing at Coursera and at DeepLearning.ai is that this increased uncertainty, shift in job roles, shift in skills is also driving increased demand from both employers and employees for upskilling. One of the challenges of education is that the short-term impact is modest, the long-term impact is profound, and so it takes a certain company and individual culture to make that modest upfront investment to then deliver these sorts of life-changing and really game-changing results for the enterprises. And I think this inefficiency has caused society writ large to underinvest in everything from early childhood education to upskilling of adult workers. But we see a lot of individuals and businesses making these investments and then over some period of time enjoying very positive ROI, increased employee retention. And I think that it's been encouraging that the pressures driven by technological change are causing businesses to also invest more in this. So have a lot more to say about the nature of work, but I think this is a good time to upskill your workforces. Get everyone, frankly, I find that, I think in the future, today, I can't imagine hiring a marketer or recruiter that doesn't know how to search the web, right? If you don't know how to use the internet, not hiring them, frankly. In the future, I think for a lot of these job roles, I will not hire a marketer that doesn't know how to code. And I will not hire a finance person that doesn't know how to get computers to do things for you. This isn't the moment of reality at this moment, but I think we will get to that world sooner than we think. But this is a good moment to prepare our workforces to learn AI and frankly, get people to learn to code. It will make them much more productive. I think with that, let me invite Neela back on. I think both of us will take questions together. Oh, thank you.
So you said that productivity will rise with AI, right? That in the coming time, when the AI comes and we're using AI, productivity should rise. But do you think that also brings a declination in the skills of people as well? Because right now I'm asking AI to make my Excel sheets. I'm asking AI to make my presentations because of course it'll make my life easier. It'll make my life quick. But do you think that it is also declining my skills of doing the same thing, of course?
The short answer, and I would love to hear Andrew's take on this, it's doing both. It's degrading some of your skills, yes. Some of those skills are being retired, and I think that's what's leading to the uncertainty in the workforce. But you're also gaining new skills. Hopefully you're learning to code. Apparently that's important. But in some ways, writing good prompts may be a new skill. You're teaching your generative AI that is producing these spreadsheets and these presentations how to do that, and that's a skill. So yeah, it's a creative destruction is what we say in economics. Skills are being created, skills are being destroyed, but overall the innovation and the productivity, the promise is that it increases.
Yeah. And I would say, I think it's okay. You know, by the way, I have no sense of direction. If you hang out with me and you ask, you know, how do you go home? I have no idea, right? So I need my GPS. And I feel like to the extent that it degrades skills that we do need humans to know, that would be unfortunate. But to the extent that it degrades skills that we can just, you know, permanently farm off to a computer, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. In computer science, we build on abstractions, or we stand on the shoulders of giants so that we can rise to greater heights ourselves. And it's okay if someone else has built a foundation for us to build on, because that's how collectively we as a society build more and more complex things.
It's what it means to be human. Just one more. I thought your question was a great opener because it reminds me of what skills won't go away. And that's the human skills, that connection, collaboration, creative thinking. In fact, if you have more time doing that and less time on your spreadsheets, that might be a good use of skills.
Hi. Thank you. So I'm just curious what aspect of coding you think is important for humans to learn, because my understanding prior was that AI would take over a lot of the coding, and so that would actually be something that would be done more by AI than humans, and that coding was becoming more obsolete. So curious, you know, what type of coding you think is important for humans to still do?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So it turns out that AI-assisted coding is incredibly helpful, and AI is taking over parts of coding. But what I'm seeing is that if you don't know how to code at all, then trying to get AI to code for you, you will almost always hit a wall that you cannot break through. Whereas people that know a little bit of coding will be able to break through and complete the task. So the data right now seems to show that AI-assisted coding gives experts a massive productivity boost and gives novices a slight productivity boost. And but we're also seeing that with AI-assisted coding, a little bit of knowledge now goes a long way. Maybe just to give you one more important trend. I know there are a lot of large businesses represented here. If I look at coding, I want to distinguish maybe 3 buckets. There's building quick and dirty software prototypes to test an idea. There is writing enterprise-grade software, and then there's maintaining legacy code bases. It turns out for the latter 2 buckets, writing enterprise-grade software and maintaining legacy code bases, AI makes you, you know, let's say 30 to 50% more efficient. I think McKinsey and others say that, which is great. 50% more efficient, fantastic. But the complete game changer is building quick and dirty prototypes just to test an idea, which for various technical reasons, I see not a 50% improvement, but more like a 10x improvement in productivity. And this means that a lot of individuals will be empowered to write those little apps to automate their own work. The last generation of robotic process automation, it's been difficult to implement, right? You know, it's just as difficult. It hasn't lived up to the early hype. But I think the next gen of RPA means that if you have 2 people or even 1 person doing a workflow, it will be economical to automate that rather than you need like 100 people doing something before you can automate it. And this will be important for the corporate innovation process too, where we would empower a lot of people to just try ideas out very easily.
And the collaboration, the digital access to this technology, not just in one location, but around the world, is what enables this demographic transition of the prime age worker from the wealthier countries into the poorer countries that is going to be needed to keep growth sustained. So it's also not just the coding, but it's the digital platform that makes that coding shared with others. So a little goes a long way to underscore that point.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Is there another? Well, we'll give. Is there? Okay, then. Oh, one here.
Sure.
Sorry. Thank you for this presentation. Could you talk a little bit more about the findings and the delta between the flexibility that workers want and what employers are thinking?
Sure. So it is, the right word is flexibility. I think a lot of times people confuse remote work and hybrid work with location, and that people want to stay at home and work in front of their televisions and, you know, play with their dog and have snacks available. I mean, honestly, I do too. But But what workers tell us is what they want is flexibility of their schedules, of their calendar, the autonomy that comes with work, not necessarily location. My mom's a teacher. It's a job you can't do remotely. 60% of jobs you can't do remotely. And we know that on-site work helps with collaboration. So it's about meeting that need as an employer, whether or not the position is mandated to be in the office or on the work site, like a construction worker, full time, but managing that with the schedule, giving people the autonomy around work that they enjoyed during the pandemic. How do you extend that? And how do you base that and root it in on-the-job training? Because that training is going to be important. It has to be delivered in a way that the global workforce can experience it. Whether it's spotty internet or spotty attention, some of that training needs to be on site. And we know that that training is vital to engagement, to loyalty, to productivity. So it's one of a pillar of how do you prepare a workforce. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the conditions that now employers have to be sensitive to.
That's cool. That's really great.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming to this. We're around for a little bit longer. Appreciate your attention.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
A brand new day, a brand new stadium.
Musim kedua, lebih mencabar, lebih hebat.
Kita dah compete 4 orang. So sekarang ni kita nak pergi mana ni?
Kita nak bawa korang ke tempat yang susah-susah orang nak masuk.
Perjalanan epik menyelami Premier League.
Today challenge is
cabaran demi cabaran menanti mereka.
Masa berjalan, takkanlah saya nak kalah juga.
KRTPS,